If you have forgotten about Quantum Break, you're probably not alone. And if you didn't play it, you missed out on both a surprisingly good third-person shooter with a lot of great ideas, and a game that got off to a pretty terrible start thanks to middling reviews, a nearly year-long delay, and plenty of technical issues on top. You can view Quantum Break as a good game that got quickly forgotten. If not for the fading popularity of single-player narrative games, the 10-hour runtime, and having no replay value, and relying on the strength of its live-action TV tie-ins, Quantum Break was definitely fighting an uphill battle from the start. But it's still a game worth talking about, as if you replay the game today, it still holds up incredibly well. At least most of it. And that's a great way to look at Quantum Break. It's a mix of good and bad, which is reflected in the alarmingly erratic distribution of review scores across the board. So today we're going to analyze Quantum Break and travel back into time to look at one of gaming's more peculiar stories.
Jack. You just... Go. This way. Move.
That was the first time my power started to manifest.
The very elusive Quantum Break was developed by Remedy Entertainment, who were best known for their work on Max Payne and Alan Wake. Max Payne revolutionized action game storytelling and slow-motion style combat akin to The Matrix, while Alan Wake was praised for its environmental storytelling and its thrilling narrative. Both games could be seen as absolutely fantastic single-player games. That is because those games were released during times that would foster that kind of praise and success. Max Payne 1 and 2 were put out during the renaissance of PC gaming during the early 2000s, and Alan Wake was released when single-player games were definitely in high demand. This is evident with the abundance of high-quality single-player games that released the same year, including Heavy Rain, Mass Effect 2, and BioShock 2, just to name a few. Quantum Break, on the other hand, never seemed to fit in its time period. Quantum Break came to the market in 2016, when the industry was in a state of perpetual change. For one, the open world craze had been going strong leading up to this point, with titles like Assassin's Creed growing in popularity, Final Fantasy XV, The Division, Watch Dogs 2, Far Cry, and The Witcher 3 leading the way as well. In addition, old game ideas like Doom were being repurposed in a more modern approach, while huge groups of gamers were migrating towards online games like Overwatch or battle royale games like H1Z1. And don't forget, cheap and mobile games were all the craze as well. Times were changing. Many elements of traditional single-player games were just dying out, like the over-reliance on linear game design, the omission of multiplayer, or outlets for additional monetization like DLC or an in-game store. There was this overarching idea floating around the industry that single-player games were just unwanted, unprofitable, and in a state of decline, approaching being obsolete. Game development, in tandem, was ramping up, flooding the markets with new and sometimes cheaper games that would drown these single-player games out. So much more was required to get a single-player game to the forefront of the industry. If you wanted to have a single-player game succeed, then you had to try something truly new, and Quantum Break definitely tried. Quantum Break has as many fantastic ideas as it does misgivings. To its core, it's basically a linear science fiction third-person cover-based shooter that emphasizes various time manipulation mechanics, and that's where its uniqueness comes in. Gameplay in Quantum Break is fantastic at first. Jack has a whole bunch of cool tools he can use. He can freeze time, he can warp around the stasis fields to attack enemies or find cover, he can cast shields, he can create time bubbles around enemies and then he can blow them up, and he can even levitate his opponents with time and then freeze them. Combining these abilities shows Quantum Break at its best, as you can zip around your disabled enemies while blasting them with the game's various weapons, shattering time in the process. The entire combat system makes for a surprisingly fast game, despite you slowing down time, amplified by excellent destructibility. Enemies will often blow your cover out from you, showering the screen in pottery, glasses, wood, and metal. It encourages you to keep moving and swapping between your cooldown based abilities when they're up, which ultimately is why the combat is so fun, because it's so kinetic and organic. You can truly feel like a badass in this game. But with this chaotic action happening all around you all the time though, it does create some moments of, what the hell did I just get shot by? Bullets dance around the screen so randomly it seems sometimes that it's difficult to keep track of all the action, although it does look really gorgeous. When it was initially released, Quantum Break had severe technical issues though that brought these issues to light, especially on the PC. For one, there was this strange problem with players not being able to spin the camera around fast enough unless they were on low graphic settings. It was bizarre. There were horrendous stuttering, frame rates, and performance issues, especially on the PC, which prompted Remedy to address the entire community with a list of fixes, yet many remain unresolved to this day. This created huge problems for Quantum Break, as its best moments lie with its very fast-paced and chaotic gameplay, which doesn't exactly work out the way you want it to when you can't control the camera correctly or the game is tanking in the frame rate department. When you could get the game running to your preference, though, it's a beautiful game that is as exciting as it is flashy. Unfortunately though, it ends really quickly. As soon as it starts, it seems that Quantum Break is over. Quantum Break can be beaten casually in 8 to 10 hours, which does include the variety of live action bits that you can access in between the game's 5 chapters. Now this wouldn't be a problem necessarily, except that the game is also incredibly easy. Of all the difficulty settings in the game, missing is an option to actually make it challenging for the hardcore market. At no point during the story did I actually die, except on the fantastic final boss. Short games that can be beaten without a sweat present a problem for serious gamers. There's just no replay value. This was brought to the forefront when gamers found out there was only one ending as well, despite the game allowing players to choose how various sections of the story play out. So there's no need to play the game again, when you discover that no matter how you interact with the game, none of your choices actually matter in the end. It's a shame because the actual storytelling is fantastic and different to what most games offer today. And depending on your tolerance for stepping outside the game to take part in the live-action TV show, it can actually add a lot to the experience given its high production values and tie in to some of the choices you make. Sadly, those choices get dumped cold turkey when you complete the game. So what we have with Quantum Break is a game that actually tried to innovate, quite a bit actually, but didn't do enough to make it matter to people who actually played the game. And as you could guess, its reception was one of the most mixed in 2016, receiving middling scores from critics ranging from an 80 to a 6 out of 10 by GameSpot. Other outlets focusing on the PC version only hammered it into the ground, calling out its technical issues and the fact that you had to pick it up on the Windows Store when the game first came out. Fast forward today though, and it's actually one of the more highly rated games on Steam. The biggest irony of Quantum Break though, is that its critical success still remains a mystery. Scouring the internet for sources, it's almost impossible to determine if Quantum Break actually sold poorly or well. On one hand, it was supposedly the UK's top-selling game for a while, had strong pre-orders, broke sales expectations, was the top-selling new Xbox One IP, and was confirmed by Remedy and Microsoft themselves to have strong sales overall. But then you stumble upon claims that in fact the game actually sold poorly or sold average at best according to industry analysts. There's also no sales information available on any financial report published by Microsoft in 2016, 17, or 2018. So which is it? One can only assume that Quantum Break actually didn't do too well, as Microsoft announced that they were not interested in having a sequel developed. Either way, it's a mystery. Quantum Break had a lot of great ideas that would get any hardcore gamer excited. Unfortunately, the widespread success of games requires that you meet both the serious gamer and the casual crowd halfway, and that's where Quantum Break failed. There's no multiplayer, it's linear, there's no cooperative play, alternate modes, new game plus, or downloadable content. There's limited player freedom and exploration. Most encounters and engagements are pre-scripted. It's not open world. The total runtime for the game is 8 to 10 hours, and choices have no impact on the ending. That's not to say every game on the planet needs to have these features, but the industry does reward games for gravitating towards those elements, at least in terms of making money. Quantum Break took some chances and is arguably one of the more underrated science fiction single-player games on the market. Yeah, it may be short, with a story too dense for its own good, the platforming might suck, there's too many emails to read, and arguably the game just doesn't have enough content. But it's still a hell of a fun game. It's ironic that a game defined and built around time has its ultimate downfall as time itself. As if it were released in 2010, I'd almost guarantee that it could have done a lot better and gotten a sequel pretty quickly. Still, it's one of the more interesting games on the market that features one of the coolest themes on the planet: time travel. Quantum Break may have gotten lost in time, but I would still recommend you check it out today. Yeah, so there's Quantum Break. I mean, what an interesting game. On one hand, we have a single-player game released during a time where single-player games were starting to die out. It knows it needs to do something to self-identify with a new idea, audience, new something, and it does do that, but it also has so many misgivings along the way. The game is way too short, it doesn't have a proper difficulty setting, aka the game is too easy. The story, while good, is kinda dense, gets in the way sometimes, there's too much stuff to read. The platforming is awful and takes up way too much of the playtime. And finally, when you get to the game's end, you just feel like, there's just not enough here. You know, just when you were starting to get comfortable with the combat, 8 hours in, you get really good, the game just drops dead. It's over. So those are kind of like the main problems with Quantum Break. Very cool game if you can get past those, definitely. I think a good question is, where are these games going to go? And Remedy Entertainment as a company. Well, next up for Remedy is a game called Control in 2019. It's going to be another single player game, so we're going to have to see when that time comes. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video today. I really appreciate it. If you want to comment down below in the pinned comments, you can tell me which game you want me to feature next on Did It Fail. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys in our next video. Take care.